Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Constance Sayers, and I'm the president of Government Executive Media Group. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's ViewCast, Federal Innovation Doing It Better. Events like this would not be possible without the support of our underwriter, so I'd like to take a moment to recognize the exclusive underwriter of today's ViewCast, Accenture Federal Services. I'd also like to thank our research partner for today's event, Government's Business Council, the research wing of Government Executive Media Group. Before we kick off today's ViewCast, I have a few announcements for the audience. Please submit your questions at any time by tweeting us at the discussion using the hashtag Federal Innovation. That's hashtag Federal Innovation. At the end of this ViewCast, our panelists will have time to answer some of your questions. On Monday, we will send an email with a link to the recorded ViewCast. Please feel free to forward this to anyone who was unable to attend today. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Dan Doney, Chief Innovation Officer, Defense Intelligence Agency, Barbara Lopresti, Chief of Technologies Management Office, Census Bureau, and Roger Baker, former Assistant Secretary and CIO of the Department of Veterans Affairs. And finally, our moderator for today, Tim Haekst, Chief Technology Officer at Accenture Federal Services. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Tim to begin the discussion. Tim.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Tim Haekst, and I'm the CTO at Accenture Federal Services. Thanks for coming. And what we're going to do is spend a few minutes talking about innovation in government, what works, what doesn't work, what challenges leaders in government are finding in order to confront them when they're trying to create environments that facilitate innovation and so on. But before we get into the conversation, I thought we'd let our panelists spend a minute and describe their background a little bit. Maybe I'll start just to get the ball rolling. As I mentioned, I'm the CTO at Accenture Federal Services. Prior to that, I grew up in the technology world at Oracle and then at Agilex, always in kind of a senior technology executive role, trying to find ways to help government take better advantage of advanced technologies. And so with that, maybe I'll turn it over to you, Barbara, to start us off.
Good afternoon. My name is Barbara Lopresti. I'm the Chief of the Technologies Management Office at the U.S. Census Bureau. And I'm responsible to provide oversight for field data collection automation activities for our current surveys and also for our 2020 census research and test activities. And my area of domain expertise is in computer-assisted technologies with respect to interviewing. I have held a number of positions in the technology area and also in managerial positions at the Census Bureau. It'll be 32 years at the end of this month. And I've always been involved in some of the leading edge technologies, starting back to when I first came on board in the 1980s with the first dual floppy PCs that came on board.
Well, there you go.
Wow. So I'm Roger Baker. From 2009 to 2013, I was the Assistant Secretary for Information and Technology at VA. The IT organization at VA is 8,000 people, providing services to the healthcare and benefits organizations inside of VA, and just part of the key delivery team for serving veterans. Prior to that, I've been largely in industry. At one point in time, I did a stint with a little organization called Visa and developed something called internet banking, so I've seen a little bit of technology. And I had the pleasure from 98 to 2001 of working at the Department of Commerce, and some of that involved working with Barbara on the 2000 census. So I guess that's a little bit of a way of saying I'm an old guy who's been around government for a while. So.
Great, thanks, Roger.
I'm Dan Doney, the Chief Innovation Officer at the Defense Intelligence Agency. As Chief Innovation Officer, it's a pretty new role in government. I think I was one of the first to hold that title, which is a fascinating new way to approach government change. I started my career as a Navy submarine officer, and on leaving the military, went out and spent time in startups, small business, and then went to an advanced research setting. So I've really experienced both sides of the innovation challenge, both the imperative to get our people the very best capabilities that in order to defend our country, and then on the other side, the real frustration knowing that you have a great capability and facing the valley of death, really trying to get that into the hands of those people who have the needs. So I'm pretty, those who know me know I'm really not short on passion and not long on patience. So I really am driving for mission outcomes as quickly as possible.
Oh, that's great. And so this is part of why I'm so excited with this panel in particular, as you hear their background. What I'm hoping to do, without putting words in your mouth, is maybe ask you each to spend a few minutes giving us some of your view on innovation. But one of the things I thought that was really interesting about your backgrounds was, Dan, you are at the front edge of some really important missions, trying to find new ways to solve problems we didn't even know we had last year. Barbara, you guys have been working on this class of problems for literally centuries, and how to improve the efficiency and the accuracy and reduce the cost by constantly innovating. And then I guess, Roger, you were working in both these domains, bringing new technologies to bear to support veterans, but also improving the processes by which you increase the quality of service. So with that in mind, I think we're in for a good discussion. Let me frame it, though, a little bit. You all three have referenced early days in government, and it was not that long ago that government was the place you came to do the latest and greatest work. It is where basic science happened. It is where new technologies were innovated. But as we've seen in the commercial world, creates such a rapid expectation of new technologies and new capabilities being developed at a pace at which the government just simply has not been able to keep up. So the government has shifted to figuring out how to adopt and apply those technologies rather than being the place where they get innovated. And so I wonder, as we think about whether it's improving existing processes or finding new mission capability, what are your thoughts in what innovation is in government, why we have challenges getting people to change in the important ways to have an innovation mindset, and then I don't know what kinds of important leadership or technological advice you might have in helping set that change forth. So I don't know, Dan, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, yeah. Look, so everyone focuses on the challenge. When they talk about innovation, they focus on the challenge of innovating. And the bottom line is, our people are innovating all the time. People innovate. That's what we do. There's a different challenge in being innovative. That's something that actually requires focus and effort to be an innovative organization. My favorite quote, the thing that probably drives our activities more than any other thing, is by Joi Ito. He says, if you want to be innovative, lower the cost of failure. And so much of the cost of failure in government has to do with these long timelines. And really, driving for speed becomes one of the central themes in being an innovative organization. That means decision agility. Decision agility requires you to decentralize your decision-making processes. Requires fiscal agility. So as we work in long budget cycles, retaining the ability to react to new developments in the world is a very important piece. Technology agility, enterprise agility, personnel agility, all of these things actually require, for a chief innovation officer, focusing on things that don't at all seem like innovation. Focusing on our core acquisition processes, focusing on our development processes, focusing on our internal HR processes becomes really the central theme for an innovation officer, making those strategic changes that make you quick. So that's where we've been focused. The mistake that many make is to think that the chief innovation officer would be the chief innovator. Mm-hmm. If you're not empowering all of your enterprise in order to engage on the innovation challenge, then you're missing out on most of your potential. So that's where we're focused as an agency.
Well, that's great. And one thing we hear a lot is people confuse innovation with invention. Mm-hmm. And the idea that I'm only innovating if I'm creating some brand new, unique thing that nobody's ever done before, rather than, like you said, improving a procurement practice or changing the way an organization works can have much broader innovative impact on the outcome than some shiny new penny, right? So that's great, thanks. What do you think, Barbara? You want to give us a few of your thoughts?
Sure. At the Census Bureau, our mission, we're all about data. We are providing quality data about the nation's economy and people. So when we look at the way we have done things in the past, innovation to us is taking a look at that and looking at where we want to be in the future and how we want to deliver data to our customers in the future. So we're looking at not only how technology can help improve our business processes, but we're looking at our business processes as a whole. So that would be, some of the main points that we're addressing at the Bureau. Some of the work that I'm involved in is work with the 2020 census in the research and test activities. My area of interest is in mobile computing, and we are working with our decennial partners, that's the 10-year census, to create mobile applications that will allow us to collect data from respondents, and these are individuals who will be using these mobile apps are the field enumerators that we hire for the 2020 census. And in the 2010 census, we armed about 500,000 people with paper and pencil to collect data. And this time around, we're looking at automating that and automating a lot of field activities to not only improve the efficiency of operations and productivity in the field, but also the effectiveness. And what that allows us to do is, once we have a mobile application and a smartphone device in the hands of these enumerators, potentially hundreds of thousands of enumerators, who are collecting data from folks who have not responded to the questionnaire, that opens up a huge opportunity for us. Not only are we capturing the data electronically, so we don't have to scan any paper or key anything, but we're also we also are able to give them near real-time assignment data. We can text them on a daily basis. In the past, during 2010, our enumerators would meet with their crew leaders every day in person, face-to-face for a meeting. And going with the mobile app and having a smartphone in the hands of those enumerators opens all kinds of doors for us in terms of how we can see what's going on in the field, collecting the data quicker and in digital form.
That's great. When you said all of that change opens us up to, I thought you might say risks and security, but you said opportunity, and that's the mindset of an innovator. And
yes.
so that's great. So I'll be looking forward to ask a few more questions of that. So Roger, why don't you give us your thoughts?
And I think, Tim, Barbara really hit it, and you hit it there. An innovator will look at the opportunity versus the risk involved with change, and that's. So at an enterprise level, from a senior management level, the question is, can you set the environment that allows innovation to occur and encourages innovation to occur? In a federal organization, there are a couple things that make innovation in the federal government hard. One is, Dan and I had this conversation earlier, centralized innovation is an oxymoron. Even though at the central office, you've got to set up an environment that encourages innovation, you've got to recognize that the real productive innovation is going to occur out of your site, and you've just got to trust that it's going to happen if you set up that environment. But the other thing is, where the federal government and we spend the taxpayers' money, you can't allow willy-nilly innovation. You can't just have everybody say, well, half my day I'm going to spend innovating and the other half I'm going to spend doing my job. It doesn't work that way either. The second thing that I find very interesting from an enterprise standpoint is dealing with the political reality that, let's just say broadly, Washington doesn't understand the failure side of innovation. It's very, very easy in 2015 from Washington to look at Google and say, wow, look at all the great innovations they did, without seeing the hundreds of companies that thought they were going to be Google that are lying in the trash heap on the side of the road along the path to that. And so if you were to set up an innovation environment in the federal government that said, yeah, I'll take a couple hundred failures for every big success. No, that's not going to be something that that anybody is going to allow you to do. And so we have the problem of trying to compare private sector innovation with what is actually an acceptable innovation approach inside the federal government. And I think that perception causes us a lot of problems as we try to set up good, productive innovation inside the government as well. We're not going to match the private sector. We shouldn't try to match the private sector from that perspective.
So let's pull that failure thread a little bit, because that's a good one. The so many government projects start with a sense that Congress wrote down what I have to do. They wrote down by when I have to do it. They wrote down exactly what it's going to have to be. I'm doing that. And there is no mindset toward the idea that I'm going to iterate and fail and try and adjust toward some goal that is the right answer, rather than that monolithic approach. And Dan, you had talked about failing quickly and creating an environment where that's okay. So maybe let's follow that thought a little bit.
Yeah, so again, this comes down to the center of the organization setting the conditions so that you can fail inexpensively. And look, if you get the impression that innovation and security go head to head, you've got the wrong sense. The innovator must co-opt the interests of security. Otherwise, when you fail, if you fail insecurely in our business, that means you won't get a chance to try again.
Right.
So much of what we do is actually laying the conditions for safe failure and cheap failure within our model. That requires us to co-opt, again, the folks who really oftentimes are seen as the enemy of the innovator, the security interests, the financial interests. A lot of that, again, if you intend to decide small, to engage in lots of little initiatives, vice great big initiatives, there's a good reason to do that. If you look at the Standish Chaos Report, many know of this report that really shows projects $1 million and below have a 75% success rate. Projects $10 million and above have about a 6% success rate. So just making that small difference in the size of a project dramatically decreases its size of failure. So why do we keep doing it? Our decision structures force decisions up to the center of the organization, where you can't scale to thousands of decisions, and you certainly aren't interested in little $10,000 investments at that senior level within the organization. We have to change those structures. And they're so common, especially in a time of austerity, where people say, we can't afford to be wasting money on things that aren't going anywhere. What you end up doing when you centralize, if you haven't set the conditions to allow decisions to be made, driving towards an enterprise goal, you end up with a bunch of great big projects that do fail and don't result in mission outcomes. So there's some irony here, and it's the kind of stuff that really challenges someone who's made their living in government and risen up through the ranks of government to think differently about the problem. And that's one of the real challenges associated with instantiating innovation in government.
So Roger, what tools do leaders in government have at their disposal to make it safe for folks to try a lot of things small and not fear failing? And
I think there's a lot of positive things that that you can do. One is you've got to put innovation projects in a different class from, if you will, your standard, we're just going to go do this kind of projects. You've got to recognize, as Dan said, maybe you do want to be paying a lot of attention to a $100,000 innovation project, even though you're not paying anywhere near as much attention to a $100 million standard software development project, because maybe the innovation project is the one that really is going to make things change. At the senior level, the big tool is budget. So how is it that you can free up and make available some level of budget to allow people to do innovative work? The other things that you can do are, are policy kind of things. I thought it was great talking about security. From a VA perspective, healthcare. You would no more go out and develop an insecure mobile app than you would one that was a bad heart monitor, for example. Those, you just kind of set those requirements and say, yeah, it's got to work from that perspective. So you set requirements that that are the hard and fast ones, and you let everything else fluctuate. You find budget, and you find ways to protect people that fail. You know, kind of that pat on the head, and that's a nice try. Now, next time you'll do just as well. Get out there and do it again, because a lot of times what occurs is that view in government: if I failed here, I'm not going to get another chance. And sometimes the best learning examples are spectacular failures.
That sense, Roger, the protecting a zone in the budget that allows for us to be opportunistic is something that is very hard to come by in government. So when I showed up to the agency, folks said, Donny, we like these ideas, we think this is good, we'd like to see you act on them. Let's add this into this was FY13, into the FY16 budget, and off we go. I'm a tenured position, so a position that's only there for 3 years, that's beyond the time when I would even be there. Setting aside that, what we call it is planning for the unplanned, really setting aside, because you don't know what's going to happen the next year, what opportunities are going to emerge, what mission changes will take place, is something, again, that isn't part of the normal budget planning cycle. The additional part of it that requires real discipline, we call it being systematically opportunistic, is once you've set aside those funds, it's not a slush fund. It's not the kind of thing that you let people just dip in and do their pet project. You want to be systematic in engaging the mission to make sure you're getting real value, but with decision agility, so that you're acting quickly on, look, the technology world is changing dramatically. You can't know what technologies are going to be available the next year that might provide real mission-changing opportunities. You got to give yourself the fiscal agility to react.
Yeah, that's great. Now,
And at the Census Bureau, we have a program called Innovation and Operational Efficiency Program. And once a year, our director sends out calls for ideas on selected topics that he's interested in addressing that year. And staff can submit their ideas, and it's then forwarded to a committee, and various committees, in fact, through the organization. And ultimately, the top ideas are presented to senior management, and those are eligible to be developmental projects. And there are some limits in terms of funding and the time that they give you to do those projects, but that's existed for the last 3 or 4 years at the
So it's like a
Census
Shark
Bureau.
Tank.
yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
And the same thing, a different structure exists at VA. There is an innovation board, and if you're a senior person, you have to sit on it, the assistant secretaries and the undersecretaries, and there's $100 million carved out of each, carved together out of all of our budgets, that is used to fund between $1 and $5 million projects to go off and do the real innovation things. So, for example, there were some IT things. We did some mobile apps and things along those lines. But there were also things like, how do you build a prosthetic that is much more comfortable to wear than the typical prosthetics that that we issue veterans today? How do you build a better cuff? How do you build something that deals with both the limb and the moisture and everything necessary there? And so the innovation things were a broad spectrum. And the fun part was seeing all the various innovation proposals come into the board. And then to what we were talking about earlier, now you've got the senior management of a $150 billion a year organization looking at $100,000 proposals like they're the most important thing, because they could be for the way you service veterans. That innovative idea could be the most important one.
That's right.
And so how does that operate as a incentive or motivator for employees as well to know that they are, because where the seeds or the need of an innovation arises is not in some visionary saying, thou shalt innovate here. It's those folks that are doing it every day, seeing the inefficiencies, seeing a flawed process, seeing a buggy solution. Getting them to know and want to lean in and step up and share their ideas might be offering an opportunity to get a little extra time to work a problem. It might be actual. I know it's a little bit more challenging in government to have other kinds of incentives, some incentives that work in the commercial world, but does this innovation program that you described, Barbara, does it inspire and create the right kind of behavior in the rest of the employee community?
Yeah, I think, people, depending on what the topics are for each year, people are engaged with this process. And the ideas are, put up on the website, and other employees can go in and vote on ideas and comment on ideas, and it's quite interesting. So it is engaging, and I think that's fundamental to any sort of innovative process, is involving staff.
We focus, our mantra for our office is ideas to action. And we really seek to engage in the same way, Barbara, the ideas that come from anywhere in the workforce. It's very important. There's a lot of efforts around government in crowdsourcing, that is really surfacing good ideas, and we are very supportive of these things. It's what happens next that is the big challenge in government. That's really how you get from idea to initiative. And in the entrepreneurial world, it's called making a business case. The big difference between an idea and something that someone can say yes or no to is that business case. Unfortunately, oftentimes in government, a lot of folks who've not been in that world aren't good at converting their idea to something that someone can say yes or no to. We've run into this a lot. The way our office functions, we bring folks from around the agency as rotationals into our office, and they then support the idea creators that happen at the mission edge. We call them Sherpas. What you find is some of the people with the best ideas are curmudgeons. That is, they've been frustrated at the agency. You're not hearing me. I want to change the agency. And so they get angry and they're mad. And so when the Sherpas engage, when someone comes forward with this idea, first they want to just throw it over. Here, you take my idea and act on it. And that's not how we work. A Sherpa helps you get up the mountain. They don't carry your bags up the mountain for you. But I have to mentor our Sherpas and train them that to expect this kind of frustration from people who have good ideas. They are sometimes quite hard to work with. It's kind of like the lifeguard rescuing a drowning swimmer, where you go out and they're just they want to beat you up. You got to live with that to help those people get up the hill and really present their good ideas. We found almost from the day that I started, it was not a lack of ideas that was holding us back. It was really the mechanisms in place to allow employees to drive towards actual outcomes that matter.
And once you get one of those curmudgeons on your side, they'll be your biggest advocate.
You've got it.
Well, let's talk about two things that government in particular doesn't do real well, on the backside of innovation. One is communicate. So, there are plenty of innovations going on in government. But for some reason, our marketing departments, oh, that's right, we don't have marketing departments. The word about what's happening with those things doesn't necessarily get out. So you made a great point. Do the innovations that you adopt then cause other people to say, wow, that's really cool, I've got this innovation, I'd like to bring it forward? And typically, to me, watching it, a government organization doesn't do a real good job of communicating across the board, these 5 innovations produced these kind of results, which brings me to the second piece is we also do an awful job of measuring the results of a lot of these innovations. So when Congress says, you spent $100 million, what did you get? If you can come back and say, well, I got a brand new prosthetic cuff that every veteran is going to love, okay, thank you very much, that was a nice $100 million. But if you don't have that kind of an answer, if you don't have something that says, we invested in the healthcare mobile app and now every veteran has it on their iPhone or something along those lines, what did you really get from that innovation? Right. And why should we support it further?
Well, it's particularly hard when these small projects, what you got is often not a major deliverable. You got the seed of something that is going to lead to next year's project, which will lead to a program 3 or 4 years from now that is going to change things. And so it's hard to put a value on that early in that cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe that's a lot about remembering the pedigree of those programs, knowing that they started with somebody's innovation.
We found that to be one of the biggest challenges that we've faced, is how you get these emerging ideas at the edge to the enterprise, to the center for sustainment in the end. It requires really a balancing act all along. You can't just take the idea off grid, do it in a lab, think it's great, and expect to throw it over and get it to thrive and live in the enterprise. It requires you really to bring engage the enterprise in the process as early as you can, understanding that enterprise engagement drives up the cost of the solution. So really, how you ramp up becomes a secret element in a successful innovation strategy.
So now, we talk a lot about choosing to innovate. We're going to set aside some resources or people or project or have an annual idea festival where we say, okay, innovate. Now it's kind of like telling somebody be funny right now. Say something funny. Like doing it and at a moment's notice is often hard. Rather than maybe creating this environment that you described, Roger, where people have a spirit of innovation in the environment that allows them to not only let their ideas wander, but feel comfortable that when they have something, the enterprise will support them. Dan, in that context, you talked about a 3-year time horizon is beyond your horizon there. You guys have a longer horizon, right? You have the holy grail of problems where you probably know the number of days, but I'll say in about 5 years, it's got to work that day. And
yes, it does.
So how do you? It seems like there's a different kind of cycle an environment that has to be created that says, we need to experiment now early. I know you do a lot of experimenting, testing, trying things early, but knowing you're giving yourself enough runway to industrialize those so that at the end game, so maybe this is a very long-winded way of saying working with a deadline versus working with more fluid deadlines and letting innovations happen is part of the challenge you face. I don't know if I characterize that correctly or not. What do you think?
Yeah, but at the Census Bureau, in addition to the 10-year census, we also have all the current programs that we work on. And so it's a two-way street. In my career, I have seen innovations that, say, happened with the 2000 census, post-2000 applied to current programs. Whereas I've seen innovations that have been done in the off years or the years, 1 to 8 on current programs that may have been applied to census. So it is a two-way street there.
That's great. You started to look like you wanted to chime in, which I expect nothing less.
I don't know if the right word for it would be unplanning. So much of what we like to do is plan, and we must, right? So there are specific objectives, there are dependencies that require planning. But in a world that's changing so quickly, our ability to adapt, which ultimately means deviate from the plan, is an important measure of an innovative organization. I think probably one of the central measures on whether or not your organization is innovative is how quickly you adapt to new stimuli. Whether that's an emergence of a new technology, how quickly does that affect your operations, or a changing mission requirement? And look at the world today for our agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency. We are seeing crisis after crisis after crisis, a focus on this area, then shifting rapidly to that area. It used to be, you could expect a crisis to last a month or two. Now we're getting multiple crises per news cycle. It requires tremendous speed to be able to keep up with these things. If you're planning for what the next long crisis will be and not building the agility as a result of that plan to allow you to adapt to what surely you did not anticipate, then you're locking yourself into yesterday's practices and at great cost.
But you have to do both. You have to recognize that there are the big strategic problems that you want to innovate down. One of the things that we looked at VA was mobility. And we recognized early on that especially on the medical side, that we were going to have to figure out from an IT perspective how to deal with all of our doctors carrying handhelds. It was just going to happen. You could say no, but that just meant you were going to get run over at some point. And so we put a lot of dollars into how do we innovate processes and adoption of mobile for the medical side of things, looking at that as a strategic issue. At the same time, personally as a CIO, I had no idea what the next medical topic would be. And one of the most popular apps that came out of the VA was done way far away from the central office. It was the post-traumatic stress disorder app, and it became something that was adopted not just for veterans, not just for service members, but really across the country, and done completely, absolutely without my knowledge, absolutely without the central office's knowledge, but in an environment where those doctors were allowed to innovate and produce what became a tremendous tool, not just for the VA, but for the country. And my point is, you got to do both. You've got to call innovation at both levels.
So as the central office, or as the CIO's office, or as director's office, I guess you have an opportunity to be a dictator and the way you run the organization and say this is the way to do things, or a gardener maybe that is responsible for how fertile the ground is, and you water it and you fertilize it, and maybe you prune weeds, and maybe you transplant big things out, but creating that environment, how do you do that? It seems like there's so much stacked against a leader in government to be able to do that, the requirements of the ongoing onslaught of program responsibility, the annual, or maybe even more than annual, sometimes budget cycle. What are the things a leader in government can do to have a fertile garden, knowing some things are dictatorial, you're going to have to do that, but create such an environment?
I think the biggest thing is the scarcest resource that you have is your personal time. And the question is, are you spending time on that from a senior management standpoint? Does the secretary spend an hour a month on innovation? That sends a signal, that he or she is paying attention. Do the senior managers spend a fair amount of time encouraging innovation in some way, shape, or form? And so it really is that, do you make it a priority? If you don't make it a priority, it's not going to happen. You can tell everybody who works for you, go out there and encourage innovation. If you don't spend some of your personal time making certain that's happening, then it's not going to happen inside of your organization.
Do you feel that works that way in Census?
I think, from a middle manager standpoint, it's very important to, I think the word you were looking for was cultivate the staff.
Sorry, I'm not really good.
And give them space, give them time, give them tools, a lab to work in. Have them work with their business partners. I think this is the key thing. Encourage your technology folks to join hands with the business units and experience their pain points hands-on. And in my area, I'm in the field domain, so I encourage my staff, go out in the field, do field observations, talk to the field interviewers, observe what's going on in the regional offices, have an exchange, a dialogue on what improvements are needed, and then bring that back to me. We do a trip report, and I'm looking for recommendations on how they could potentially impact what's going on out in the field. So at the lowest levels, I understand senior manager, that sends a message, but at the lowest levels, sometimes folks just say, well, that's what those guys at headquarters are doing. At the lowest levels, if you have your line managers encouraging that, I think that is critical and the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Roger, you talked about mobility innovations at the VA and how you thought you might get run over if you did not adopt that.
There was no thought. I could see that truck coming.
And that truck was built and driven by industry, right? So the pace of change of technology in the commercial world has set a whole new level of expectation for how rapidly new technologies are adopted. And mobility is probably a good example. In my career helping IT and government, I never saw a new technology go from zero to adopted to deployed inside of government as fast as mobile smart platforms. Even though it took a half a decade. It's extraordinarily fast. So how is the expectation for an agency's agility and responsiveness, Dan, that you were talking to the change in mission, change in internal processes, but also change in the technology landscape that they are reminded every day that we are not yet exploiting? How much do you think that impacts the expectations as well as the ability of an organization to adopt those innovations?
So the wider the gap between what's possible, what the standard practices are at the forefront of what industry is doing, and what we have in our enterprise settings, the harder it is, the more expensive it is to bring those good ideas from outside the organization in. So in fact, that's an important focus area. Really streamlining the processes by which we adopt those technologies that are developed outside of our ecosystem. If you're not focused on that problem, you're not going to stay ahead of the game for long. So that piece really involves, it's one of those things, Roger, your points about measuring innovation, this is one of those things that can be measured. How long does it take you to take a technology developed completely outside of your sphere of influence and bring it not just to a lab, but into an enterprise setting? If, as a leader, you focus on that and you measure it, and frankly, if you look across government, the numbers are quite high, well outside of the disruption cycle of technologies, which is a very dangerous place to be. Focusing on that, too, one of the things that we're looking at as a stretch goal is 30-day fielding from a conformant technology, from the time a technology conforms to when we use it in a mission setting, including accreditation, acquisition, integration, should be 30 days. That requires you to do things very differently as a leader. And those things can be addressed systematically. That's how you tap into, ultimately, the things that are emerging that you can't predict, that are going to affect the way you do business tomorrow.
I think what really got us with mobility is that within 2 years, every one of our employees was suddenly carrying this device and wanted to know why they couldn't use it inside the enterprise when they could use it everywhere outside the enterprise, and they could see what it was doing from their perspective. So that moved from mobility being the BlackBerry, which we issued, to mobility being the iPhone and the Android, which they bought themselves, was huge. And I kind of think of it as a little bit of the canary in the coal mine and what's happening to government right now. We are moving, as you point out, we're moving from adapt. Government used to, anytime a new technology came out, spend the money to adapt it to the government's needs. You can't adapt on a rapid cycle. We have to move to adopt. You can only adopt on a rapid cycle, which is to change yourself to be able to bring the technology in. And so if you're going to innovate in that environment, innovation is 30 days. If it's a commercial product and it doesn't violate one of our main rules, then we got to be able to use it in a mission within 30 days. Well, that's an innovative thing in and of itself. And I think mobility kind of drives us to that, but you see it in a lot of other areas now with cloud and a lot of other things. There are still a lot of government people that would just as soon fight some of this adoption off and keep it in the adaption world. That's a truck that's honking its horn very, very loudly right now.
Well, I want to save a few minutes for questions. So as quickly as our conversation has gone, I thought maybe I'd ask each of you to spend a second and bring us home with your thoughts on maybe a few tactical things that people can do today or tomorrow as leaders in government to create an environment that fosters innovation, and whether it's leadership issues or tools that be put in place or new policies and processes. Dan, you want to start, or do you?
Sure. So we've oftentimes getting serious about innovation, as I mentioned earlier, requires you to tackle some things that aren't in fact the normal home for innovation. One of those areas is acquisition. So we've laid in place a model called Needipedia that allows us to ask the long cycle associated with generating a broad agency announcement or RFP. can be 6 to 9 months in a good agency. We've been able to shorten that down to a matter of days to engage industry with our particular needs through a model. Those kinds of frameworks that allow us to engage another mechanism called Open Innovation Gateway. Again, addressing this challenge of how we rapidly bring things developed outside of our environment inside. I think Barbara pointed this out, an internal venture capital process that allows us to be systematically opportunistic and really apply funds quickly to emerging opportunities or emerging needs is another very practical thing that there's a variety of different ways you can pull it off, but that a number of agencies are experimenting with.
Barbara, what do you think?
So I would encourage leaders to encourage their staff to collaborate not only internally with the business units, but with industry and with academia. I know we do a lot of work with academia and industry at the Census Bureau. We've gotten great ideas, and those ideas have morphed into programs that we've put together. So I think, getting ideas externally and not thinking so insularly is another action that one can take.
And how good are the tools for that kind of collaboration? And do you feel like you're getting to a point where the technology is actually helping facilitate that, or is it good old-fashioned sitting around the table and a whiteboard?
It's some of that. We have conferences, we have advisory committees that come into the Census Bureau and work with census staff. There's tons of industry conferences that folks attend in the Washington, D.C. area. There are user groups and things of that nature. We do have a pretty good rapport with Statistics Canada and other governments throughout the country, or throughout the world. And we have exchanges with them. So, but yeah, it's pretty much phone, in person, or web.
Great.
That's about it.
So I think my view is that innovation is a leadership issue. If you are at any level of leadership in an organization, what are you doing to encourage innovation in your organization? To an extent, I look at leaders in the government as risk absorbers. So as we talked about, how do you let people fail? How do you let them fail, or succeed quickly, fail quickly? How do you let them innovate in a way that the environment is safe, they've got opportunities to do it, and you're encouraging innovation to occur in your organization? And some of that is making certain that you're spending enough of your time on it that everybody gets the signal that it is something that that you want to have happen in your organization.
Excellent. That's great. This has been great fun, but you're not off the hook yet. We have a time for a few questions. I'm happy to say our audience out in the virtual world from which they are watching have sent in some questions. So maybe I'll pose them to you guys and we can round robin it a little bit. So first, I feel like Jimmy Fallon. I wish I knew who the @* name was. I could
Maybe
say
we
it
can
from.
tell you when you ask the question.
That's right, or Karnak. A duck, no.
I wonder what my wife asked.
Exactly. We'll be able to tell. So from a grassroots perspective, if someone in the trenches has an idea and the agency doesn't have a formal intake process, how or to whom should they submit that idea?
A good venture capitalist would be a... Oh, sorry.
So you guys have all worked in environments where you didn't have that kind of annual process, and maybe you don't want to wait for the annual process. What do you suggest as a route in at least your 3 agencies, but maybe in your experience in others, for people to take?
Well, I'd go through the chain of command. Go to, first talk to colleagues, see if they are in agreement. And then if we had a consensus there, maybe go to my first line supervisor. Depending on the reporting relationships, go to a second line supervisor. Talk with the business unit, see if they agree as well, and start some momentum that way and get people to listen.
Yeah.
And the more people that listen, it'll get noticed.
I think that's a great point. One of the first things about an innovative idea is to find out whether a number of people think it's a good idea or it's just something that you think. So first thing is a little bit of vetting. Mm-hmm. Building a base of people that say, hey, this is a really good idea, we ought to do it. is a good way then to go in and talk to your management. Look for the other innovative, who's going to benefit from the innovation idea. So let's say if you're in the IT organization and you don't see it going anywhere, but you're serving the healthcare organization, is there a doctor or a facility director or somebody that would benefit from the innovation who could grab onto it and say, yeah, I'd really like to see that? Because you're selling up the chain. So the better base of believers you have, the better you're going to sell it, and the people that can really look at it and say, I'm going to benefit from that, are the people that are going to help you move it up the organization as well.
One of the things you can do, I would suppose, we have something called our Innovation Advisory Working Group. It was a body that existed before I came on, but it was really a set of lackeys for the senior leaders who had their own agenda. We repurposed that to a crowd refinement model, and it's exactly what you said, Roger. It's a place where, and someone could create such a body, where someone comes forward with their ideas and shares it. And oftentimes you'll find that this part of the organization didn't know that that part was already doing the same thing, and you can connect to other people. It's where you can find, oftentimes, an implementation champion, the person who can help you execute on your particular idea. That model for bringing up and improving and refining the idea to an initiative is a critical enabler to an innovative organization. If your agency doesn't have one, I'd highly recommend that you create one. Sometimes you need a relief valve from that part of the organization where the issue is big enough and cross-cutting enough that you do need to engage more senior leaders on it. So that mechanism, that relief valve, senior leaders have a responsibility to put that in place so that good ideas don't die with a bunch of people who are excited about seeing what's next. We call that our Innovation Advisory Board, and it bubbles up for a crisp decision from senior decision makers.
Can I add an answer too? I don't know if I'm allowed, but
I think you're allowed.
There is some value in personal tenacity associated with an idea about which you are passionate, and so in my experience, probably one of the most innovative things I'd ever had the pleasure to be a part of, the fellow who was working for me, I told him week after week after week to stop working on that. I thought, you are wasting your time. Now, he started doing it at night and on weekends. He was still doing his job real well, but he just could not let it go. And there came a point when what was passionate to him became obvious to me, and now it is technology many of you have all touched, I'm sure. And so that it takes patience and time, but if you are passionate and about your idea, if it is something that you can begin to pursue yourself in testing it or piloting it or creating a vision for what it might empower, then over time people will listen and people will open the right doors, I think. With the incoming millennial workforce, how can the spirit and culture of innovation be nurtured to attract and retain them? So in what way do you think they have different expectations or different tools that they bring to a government environment?
I think it's a lot about the processes that we ask them to work inside of. I think everybody sitting here, as we talk about innovation, but we're also a fan of things like agile development. How do you do things much more quickly? I happen to have up close and personal experience. My 23-year-old daughter is a web developer, and she doesn't do things slow. She expects pretty much immediate results out of what she's doing, and everything is done in that very, very rapid turn. I can't imagine someone with that approach to things coming in and being told, yeah, your next delivery is in 3 years on this program. Make sure you're ready for it. It just doesn't it doesn't go with them. So a lot of it's just the processes that we expect them to work inside of.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay, sold. What are some stories you can share about how innovative ideas were able to gain initial traction in an environment where innovation isn't the culture?
We started on our innovation plan 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago, and we knew right away for people to take, there's considerable skepticism over anything called innovation. People were using it as an excuse to get money for their pet projects. It was not necessarily well received. We knew that we needed to get results immediately. So we enacted this process by which we made crisp decisions, and within a couple months, we'd kicked off an internal wireless project. If you know anything about the intelligence community and wireless don't go together very well. We took, actually, not a long 3-year project on it. We borrowed a sister agency's project that they had been doing in a lab. We investigated it closely, saw that it was legitimate, it had real value, and it addressed the security considerations. And we sought to deliver an operational system very quickly. That paid dividends. People saw that, in fact, change was possible. We've had subsequent successes along those same models. I'll give you one other one super quick. We have something called the Nerd Brigade. This model actually embeds high-end technologists, data scientists, with what I would call disenfranchised mission users. So we had seen successes where people combined technologists and, in our business, intelligence analysts together in cordoned off areas, and good things invariably happened. We said, well, why can't we do that for the enterprise? So we took and dropped them out in a place that not many folks had bothered to go, but that was a central part of what our agency does. We deliver foundational intelligence. They sat together and within 2 weeks came up with a solution that saved 65% of that analyst's day. There was no requirement as they went out there, simply observe what the pain points were. It was a remarkable turnaround that caused explosive energy around this particular process. So get those quick wins in order to get buy-in from folks, because rightly so, there's considerable skepticism about efforts to chase after bright, shiny objects that oftentimes don't deliver value.
And I agree with back in 2011 when we saw iPhones, iPads coming out, and we wanted to take advantage of consumer devices for field data collection. We went out to Apple and we met with Apple, and we were able to do a pilot project. I think it was about 6 weeks or so, where we put a census questionnaire up on an iPhone, and we showed that off to some key people in the bureau, and they got excited about it, and their excitement led to some funding for where we are today with our mobile applications. So, yes.
That's great. Yeah, nothing like mobility to make it real for people quickly. And so that's exciting.
Yeah.
How about you, Roger?
Well, we talked a little bit about the healthcare mobility apps inside of VA. The one that really was the most gratifying is our initial innovation investment in a healthcare app became something called the Caregivers application. The most seriously wounded veterans, the ones that are, if you will, catastrophically wounded, typically a family member has become their lifetime caregiver for them. And that caregiver, the veteran and the doctors, have to be very, very tightly tied in the way that they work. We're able to give these caregivers iPads and the full medical record on that iPad, so that now, instead of a phone call or whatever, they're entering data, they're seeing data, they're in constant communication with the doctor. It reduced hospital readmissions for care for those seriously wounded veterans by a substantial percentage. If you think about it, yeah, that cuts costs for VA. A hospital readmission for a substantially wounded veteran is a big deal. It improves quality of life for those folks and for the caregiver. That's a big innovation deal from my standpoint. That's got real impact on people's lives.
Well, that's great. What a delightful conversation this has been. I really appreciate all of your insights and your experience and your service, and so thanks. I wish we could have gotten to all of your questions. However, if you have more questions, as was mentioned earlier, this whole conversation is going to be posted online, and you'll be able to see it, I think, starting Monday. And but if you have questions in the meantime, we're going to send you to govefficiency@accenturefederal.com, and we'll do our best to get those questions circulated among our folks or others that might be able to give you the kind of response you need. So we know how valuable your time is, and so we appreciate you spending some of it with us today. I hope it was as valuable for you as it was for me. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank
and
you.
Thank you.